broadcast available through the Council's website. The Council is a data controller under the General Data Protection Regulations and the Data Protection Act 2018. We broadcast and record Council meetings to fulfil our public task obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected during the process will be retained in accordance with Council published policies available through the Council's website. Members of the Council are reminded that they should follow the Council's established meeting protocols, including around the use of the chat facility, and comments made in the chats facility are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who've also received invites to the meeting. Lindsay, do we have any apologies or substitutions or declarations of interest?
We have apologies from Councillor Maguire and Councillor Cassidy substituting. We'll now move to a roll call. The following members please indicate if they are present at the meeting either in person or remotely. Councillor Brennan.
Present remotely.
Councillor Cofferty.
Present.
Councillor Crowther.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Paisley.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Law.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Cassidy.
Present in the chamber.
Thomas Mackenzie.
In the chamber.
Councillor Moran.
In the chamber.
Councillor Quinn.
Present remotely.
Councillor Reynolds.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Wilson.
Present in the chamber.
Are there any declarations of interest?
Oh, fine. Thank you, Lindsay. Welcome to our colleagues in Police Scotland and Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. It's good to see you here today. Particular welcome to Chief Superintendent Laura Waddell, as this is probably your last meeting here with us before you move on to the old and new, which I don't know where you're going, but I'm sure we'll find out at some stage. I'll say a few words later on. We move on to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Performance Report.
Thanks, Peter.
David.
Shortly bring in Group Commander Rod Anderson, who joined the team. Rod was part of a group looking at our on-call staff across Scotland. That project work has completed and the recommendations have been put forward. So the service have been delighted to secure Rod's services. Rod will please go on the inside work. It was actually posted at the previous committee, but given the nature of the topics we were just going to have, good here, so bring Rod in at that stage, but Rod will be here moving forward.
Is that sort of headlines like this? Is that?
Yeah, that sort of thing.
That sort of thing. Okay. Good. Good to see you, Rod. We look forward to your comments.
To the actual performance indicator within the quarter will actually positive. We'll see an increase, and that's largely down to secondary fire, which has to do something bigger. But as Rod goes through the report, we see that some of the indicators are actually a majority in positive territory. Just one thing I'd like to mention today. Before we start, obviously up until the 1st of July, we've been talking about the work around unwanted fire alarm signals. In the first month alone in July, we had 605 successful call challenges within the rest of Scotland. So in simple terms, that is at least 1,200 blue-light journeys for fire appliances that have been stopped that were unnecessary. So really positive so far. We still continue to work with business to make sure that they feel informed and supported. And I'll bring future statistics around UFAS. So I would fully expect we see a 9% increase in false alarms over UFAS apparel. And the future report, I would expect to see a significant increase in quarter on quarter for the UFAS statistics. But very positive stuff so far. So I'll just bring in what we take through the report. Thank you.
That's good, yeah. Yeah, so just to move on to the report, as David's already covered, the overall trends for Inverclyde, we have got shown a 69% increase in fires, both primary and secondary, but the majority of those are secondary fires. As you'll get more detail further on in the report, I'll break that down for you. Special services, we've got a decrease of 13%, with local 65, and we've got Inverclyde in the last quarter. And as we mentioned, false alarms are up 9%, with local 217 across Inverclyde in the last quarter. As well, we touched on our group act policy coming in the 1st of July, so those figures we can start to see a trend reducing as we go across, and service are working on launching those figures, and hopefully will be for figures once we've reviewed since 1st of July. Total incidents across Inverclyde are up 32%, and there were 12 fire and fire casualties across the quarter, which is down 3%. To move on to the more specifics, in terms of our total number of incidents, all fires, there's an increase across them so far in this calendar year, financial year, and our false alarms remain fairly static, although not necessarily this is down by 9%, we hope that will start to decrease further as we go on, and inspector services again remain fairly static across the period. In terms of accidental dwelling fires, so there's a it's possible there's a reduction of 8% in the year figure and reduction of 20% over the 3-year average in our accidental dwelling fires. As well as those figures, there's also been a 4% decrease since last quarter in our accidental dwelling fires. But even alongside that, we don't take that as we don't get complacent in taking that. So our operational crews continue to carry out most domestic incident response following all our domestic incidents. And alongside our community action team, they are out engaging with our communities through home fire safety visits, etc., and carrying on the preventative work we have in place. And as we've touched on, it was very pleasing to note that detection was present in all properties affected, and in 92% of occasions it was detection in place that raised the alarm, which resulted in us being mobilised. The accidental dwelling fire casualties. So in the period covered by the report in that quarter, there have been no fire casualties in that reporting period, which is a 30% reduction in the 3-year average. And this again confirms the importance of having swift early detection within the home. And as we've already touched on, our camping and operational crews continue with our prevention and education activities and carrying out automatic action plans to engage with the public to try and maintain those lower casualties going forward. Unintentional injury and harm. Again, it's been a 9% reduction on the year-on-year indicator, but there has been a slight increase of 7% on the 3-year average. It's worth noting that this is against historically low figures. The majority of the casualties that we have under this topic are still as a result of road traffic collisions, the remainder being as a result of incidents where SFRS have been asked to assist other agencies, and the majority of those are also entry, generally for the ambulance service, when they've been mobilised to walk past premises for collapsed persons, etc. Education and prevention activities by community action teams, road safety campaign, alongside our partners continued over the summer. And water safety awareness sessions were also delivered at partnership with PAWS as part of our work to try and keep that trend of reducing figures on that topic. Delivered fire setting. So this one is where there has been an increase, a 6% increase in year-on-year figure, and an 18% increase on the 3-year average. Of the 300 delivered fires recorded over this quarter, 4% were primary fires, and the remaining 96% were secondary. The delivered secondary fires make up 96% predominantly grassland and refuse fires, with vehicles and dwellings accounting for the majority of deliberate primary fires. Our community action team continues to work closely with our partners across Inverclyde and through the Inverclyde Hub to work together to take a targeted approach to reducing deliberate fire setting across Inverclyde. Our community action team are also working very closely with our education partners within Inverclyde, and our education engagement syllabus for 23-24 has been distributed to all schools across Inverclyde. And this work includes a focus on educational input on fire-related and social behaviour, again aimed at reducing the statistics we see that deliberate fire setting on the increase. Non-domestic fire safety. So there's been a 30% decrease in the year-on-year figure and 5% of the 3-year average. The welcome downtrend from the previous quarter regarding non-domestic fire incidents continues this quarter. Within these figures, severity is low, and 75% of the incidents to which we were mobilised required no firefighting action by the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. So where incidents do occur, our team of protection officers carry out a post-fire audit, and this is to identify if there's any failures in fire risk assessment carried out by the duty holders, and to provide legislative support to those duty holders to ensure that they can meet their obligations under the Fire Scotland Act. And moving on to unwanted fire alarm signals. So I've got touched on already, there's been that reduction in the overall figure. There's a slight increase in the 3-year figure, 15%, and it's still just want to note that the majority of UFAS incidents are potentially avoidable due to human error or faulty equipment. Although there's a slight reduction in UFAS incidents compared to this time last year, that is the same as balanced by the increase in 3-year average. The main locations of UFAS incidents in terms of premises remain education and hospital premises, and our protection teams are working closely with the Education Department and with NHS, Glasgow and Clyde partners to continue to drive down all UFAS incidents within these types of premises. And in fact, the protection team are meeting with our partners like Clyde this afternoon with regards to assisting them with reducing UFAS in those NHS premises. And one last thing is that our summer thematic action plan ran from the 19th of June to the 21st of August. And through this, our operating crews and CAT team were involved in community safety engagement activities around reducing fire-related antisocial behaviour. This covered refuse fires, outdoor fires involving grass, heath, land, heather, etc., fires involving forestry, and also provided targeted advice and guidance in regards to water safety, fire safety on boats, fire safety and sleeping risks, particularly caravans and campsites. Hotels and boarding houses, include short-term lets and road safety. And that concludes our report.
Well, that was very comprehensive. David, is there anything you want to specifically point out yourself from that report?
Just where I started, convener, if we look at that last page around unwanted firearm signals, we can note that there's residential homes and hospitals in there, they are exempt. Under the new, they would still be under the report period. Primary secondary schools and supermarkets as successful call channels, that would reduce 26% of those calls around unwanted firearm signals. So something we'll keep a weathered eye on and make sure that the customers, if you like, the stakeholders out in the community feel support and educated. But from a risk perspective for the public and for our firefighters, it's a really positive first step in the UFAS. I appreciate that it's years and years of learned behaviour, both internally in the service and externally from the expectations. But from a safety perspective, a business continuity perspective, and the ability for our firefighters to free up capacity to train, it's made a very positive start.
So it's working?
Yeah.
Okay. Colleagues, any questions for the fire service? Provost?
Thank you, convener. Yeah, thank you for the report. While those statistics are interesting enough, since our last meeting, we've had probably one of the biggest fires we've had in Inverclyde for a while with the Clune Park School at Robert Street. Now, we're hearing lots of anecdotal stuff about that, about crews having to come from far off areas and Port Glasgow not being able to turn out a retained crew. Is that correct? Could you give me a sort of idea of how that went?
So the night of the Robert Street fire, the normal predetermined attendance would have been originally the 2 appliances from Port Glasgow. So the first appliance from Port Glasgow got the call. I've actually got the narrative log here, and we're in attendance within about 2 minutes. The on-call appliance had 3 of our crew, but waiting on a crew member coming in, shown as available in the system, but for personal circumstances didn't arrive at that stage. As soon as they confirm they haven't got a crew, then the crews from Green are then mobilised. But as by its very nature, depending on the first message that goes back from the incident commander, so they'll turn up, assess the situation, and send back what we call an assistance message. So in this case, the watch commander from Port Glasgow turned up, realised that the fire was already relatively well developed, and made an assistance so level 2. So that increases the predetermined attendance, and those resources will then infill into Inverclyde. There was a lot of misinformation around that particular incident. There was an assertion that crews were standing about for an hour not doing anything because the high peak was coming from elsewhere, which was the case, but the fact was they were still doing manual firefighting as we would have done with ground monitors and jets, etc. And actually spoke to the watch commander about it. There was also anecdotal evidence that the stations within Inverclyde hadn't been backfilled with appliances. Again, there was no basis in fact there. As soon as we know that those resources are going to be tied up at that incident for a period of time, our operations control centre in Johnson, in conjunction with the duty officer, will send other appliances into customer stations. So it's frustrating at times that there is information out there, but back to your point about non-qualified, yes, that's true. The crew, once they said they're a crew of 3 rather than 4, then we go back to our default position, which is mobilising resources. I mean, it could be for varieties, it could be a mechanical reason, but we've got supporting resources that we can mobilise at that point.
Thank you.
Okay, Provost. Councillor Crowther.
Thank you, convener. This one probably comes under the domestic safety accidental dwelling fires. Now, looking through the list there, I don't see anything on that there that would indicate where it's the fire has been caused by the charging of electric bikes, electric scooters. But we have read through the likes of the press that it seems to be that it's a major issue in many areas, and it's the intensity of the fires that we have where it's been caused by charging overnight of these electrical bikes and scooters. Do you have anything in place as to how you would handle such a fire if you are aware that it has been caused by these types of vessels or vehicles rather?
It's a really good question. It's a really sort of relevant question just now. As a conversation we had yesterday, the management team had a visit to Glasgow Airport yesterday. We do regularly just to make sure that we're aware of all the known risk. And the conversation about electric vehicles came up because in a lot of the areas within Glasgow Airport, they don't allow electric vehicles to come in because of the heavy nature of the batteries that are contained within them. And that's a problem. You can imagine an e-cigarette, an electric scooter, an e-bike, or vehicles. And in our case, we have our first ever electric fire appliance that's on trial at one of the stations within Lancaster. I don't think it's on the run yet. But thermal runaway is a significant challenge for the fire service, and there are groups working centrally within the National Fire Chiefs Council to look at it, because essentially it's going to require a hell of a lot of water and the contaminants issue with the water that's there. So it really is a good question, Councillor. It's something Fire and Rescue are trying to keep up with the technology, we move the technology moves. But when thermal runaway, conveners just a term for when the battery gets into such a condition that the situation perpetuates. But from a fire and rescue perspective, it's time and water that will eventually put it out. But it is a challenge for us more and more vehicles to launch. It's a very, very relevant question.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Law.
Thank you, convener. My question's related to the deliberate fires. In my ward, it seems to be a particular problem, but I can see across other wards too. As I was glad to see that you said you were working with other groups to sort of increase awareness and education in these areas. I just wondered, what does that look like? What kind of stuff's being done, and who's receiving that information?
Again, it's a really good question. Historically, when we've looked at hotspot areas, as we were called, certainly back in the MATRAC days within Inverclyde, you always tend to look at the deficit-based approach. Where's the problems? Who are the problem people? Where are the problem areas? And we're moving now, hopefully, towards solution mode, where we look at, an asset-based approach, where we're actually looking to who can help us out here, because it's a perennial issue for us. And problem with Scotland, we know only too well how brazen the nature of some of the individuals that are doing this. They are, and I'm not being too direct when I say they're literally setting fires, or our crews are trying to catch them up.
Yeah.
It really is a frustration for us, but it has to come through education. It had to come through getting in through that schools programme in conjunction with colleagues and the police and the local authority to try and educate. There's no point hitting people over the head with a stick all the time and saying that the problem. We need to get in there and make them understand the knock-on effect. And we've seen it played out within the local press about tying up emergency resources across both parties here. And it's important that the resources we've got available are available for actual emergencies. So it's an ongoing, and if any partner in the room or anyone wants to assist within that, I'm more than happy to do it. But it can be frustrating at times, depending on the weather. On one hand, we all want good weather. On the other hand, sometimes people are wearing these black uniforms look outside and go, really?
Yes.
It's one of those things. But we continue to work through the hub Monday, Wednesday and Friday with the community action team and colleagues and the local authority in place to try and identify ways in which we can, and it can be diversion activity. Many moons ago we used to get involved in street football down in Europe. So any avenue that we can put our shoulder to the wheel, I'm more than happy to look at.
Thank you.
Do you want to add something?
Yeah, just
What I take, Councillor Cole?
Yeah, Thanks very much, Convener. Just on the back of what David's saying, and obviously they're working with partnership through the hub, we are engaging with our education college, and we have just sent a letter out to all parents, especially about the Robert Street, about young people hanging about that. And a part of, there's a National Youth Work Week coming up in November, and we've asked our colleagues from Police Scotland and Fire Service to again support that. So we'll be in every school looking about the safety element of this to try and stop young people being involved in some of these instances, but we are on the case, and it's supported through Community Safety Partnership.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Long?
Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Clockerty, you've been very patient.
Yeah, I think my officers probably stole my fire a wee bit there, so I hollered with them later. I think for all of us around here, and it goes to what Drew said and what Kirsty said there. I think none of us surprised here of a major fire in Robert Street in Park area. Right? I think most of us thought it's an accident waiting to happen. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, we're glad it wasn't one of the tenements. And I suppose my question is to try and get some sort of reassurance. I mean, I suppose Drew touched on it in the retained team from Port Glasgow. I think for us as councillors for Clyde, knowing that that is our area, if something's going to go wrong, majorly wrong, it's going to go majorly wrong in Clune Park area, and it ties into the police, ties into yourself, it ties into what Hugh was saying as well. And I suppose it's just some sort of reassurance for us as elected members about how high a priority we've still got people staying in Clune Park area, which is the most scariest thing out of it all. You know, by all accounts, we've still got 20 families or so staying in there. So it is a worry for all of us around here that should there be a major fire there, you know, where are we? Can you give us some reassurance that it is top of your priority, or near the top of your priority within Clyde, and that reassurance that we've got plans in place should there be a major incident like what happened in the school, possibly the church or one of the tenements that lived in places or occupied places. I think that assurance would do us a lot, that will alleviate a lot of problems, because I think we're all worried about what's going to happen to Clune Park.
Yeah, I think Councillor Moran asked the question, a number of committees know about unoccupied buildings, and we have a register of them. Clune Park is its own entity sitting out with that. Legislatively, from a fire and rescue perspective, we don't have any powers to close the buildings, demolish the buildings, make a comment on the suitability of the building within a domestic accommodation. So at that point, my responsibility, which is always my responsibility, is not firefighter safety and public safety. So if we see buildings that aren't secure, we'll work with colleagues in the local authority or whoever the building owner is to get that secured. From a health and safety perspective and a firefighter safety perspective, the local authority for quite a period of time now have been very good, giving us a live landscape of their intelligence of the estate, and that allows us the commanders when they turn up to decide what level of risk they will take to go into that home. So if there's a life risk, they're going to take the risk that's responsible for saving a life. If they have intelligence that the building is entirely clear, then they may take a different tack in terms of a tactical plan, for example, the use of appliances to fight that fire. So from our perspective, we've made sure that crews are aware of live information. We've made sure that they have kit available to them, such as image cameras, which makes the internal layer of the building and fire conditions easier for them to navigate through the building. And at that stage that we do to make sure that we have a response plan suitable for that site. It's far from ideal. It has gone on for a number of years, maybe I don't know. Everyone in this room would have wanted, but I would love to give the local authority a magic wand. I do see opportunities for Clune Park in the future, and I've socialised something at some forums that I think that we could look at. And Police Scotland talks about shared services, etc. That's probably longer term, but if I can help in any way to solve the issues around Clune Park, and I'm conscious that it's been going on for quite some time.
I don't see anything on the screen.
David.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Moran.
No, sorry. It's just David was saying, you know, the three workers they've worked to, and when I went to visit, you know, it's always if it's a theme park now. There's so many people visiting. I was really astounded the amount of people that come have a look. You know, and I know that on Facebook, or it's a place to see now. You know, and until we sort of control the access and egress to that particular park, which is wide area now, I think we're going to the same problems. Because the problems I've seen with constituents from Wilson Street, and they're living in loving hell, quite honest with you, them in Montgomery Street, because they're in the front line of that Clune Park. And until there's a message out there, it's not a place to visit. Don't come into a photograph at it. You know, maybe that would go a long way to stop it becoming something on the tourist track now, you know. And that day I was actually astounded with the amount of vehicles that was appearing. And I knew in the guy's property, what happened here, you know, I don't come to here, but and these questions happened, and I said, well, what are you doing up here? Why you come here? Why would they see us for if you don't come from here? So I think there is a question to ask with the council and maybe there are agencies, is there going to become a control and egress solution to that problem? And I think that we have to look seriously at that.
Thank you, Councillor Moran. I don't see any more lights on. Thank you very much, David and Rod. I think that your report was really most reassuring. There has been a bit of scaremongering recently in the papers, and I must say, not by any member of this panel. Everybody's been very supportive, but I think today was a very positive report. And thank you to both of you. We move on now to Police Scotland performance report. Damien, Laura, who is going to?
Thanks, Convener.
You're pulling rank.
I am pulling rank, yes. I have prepared a bit of an update from our last extraordinary scrutiny, so I don't know if you want me to start with that or if you want me to go straight into the performance report.
I think if you start with that, we'll get that out of the way. Thank you, the budget situation.
Okay, so as members will recall, I gave a bit of an update in terms of where we are with the establishment reduction. So just in furtherance to that, the executive have now set up what's called a Police in Our Communities programme, and that's basically the kind of high-level strategic overview and look at what we're going to look to try and do differently within the organisation. So you'll recall that we've reduced from about 17,234 officers down to around about 16,600. We are in the process at the moment of a proportionate reduction of police staff as well, to come in with the budget, and that will be a 3.7% reduction in police staff. Now that's none of that is what any of us want, quite clearly. There was a pre-budget scrutiny paper was submitted by Police Scotland and SPA, so the Scottish Police Authority, to the Scottish Parliament's Justice Committee regarding the impact if we are continually underinvested. So if you can bear with me, I'll just take you through some of the highlights from that report. It was published online, if members haven't seen it so far, by the Scottish Parliament, and it was ahead of the evidence on the 13th of September. But in essence, if we receive a further flat cash budget for 24-25 and we receive a 2% pay award, that would mean that we will need to reduce by a further 600 officers across the organisation and 200 members of police staff, which is quite significant, clearly. And amongst all that, we've also published a Q1 performance report, and you'll see, if members have had the opportunity to read through that, that there's a combination there of increasing demand on Police Scotland and increasingly complex demand as well. So along with the reduction in officers and staff, it is having a detrimental effect on our performance, and there's no avoiding that at this time. Reduction in service will be an absolute last resort for us, and we will continue to respond and will continue to prioritise our incidents and crimes in terms of data and crime. So I suppose that the reality then of this moving forward is that projects such as the body-worn video, which is really important for our officers and for our communities, that project could be under jeopardy. Our core operating solution, so we still don't have a single crime management system across Scotland. We're about to roll that out into the west. It's already in the north and the east. But again, that could bring that into jeopardy, and that's imperative that the west of Scotland receives that core operating solution. So, as I said at the start, the Police in Our Communities programme has been established, and I'll give you some key highlights of what's running underneath that. So there is a review of our executive structure, and that will be presented to the new Chief Constable Jo Farrell when she arrives on the 9th of October. There is a review of the senior command, so Chief Superintendent, the Superintendent rank and staff equivalent, and that's looking at our succession planning for the future, looking at on calls. We are looking at all our temping and acting ranks across all the ranks, and looking to rationalise those where we can. Reviewing our corporate functions, we are trying and working really hard to bring ourselves back in terms of our overtime spend, to bring us back in on budget. And there's various other reviews ongoing. In addition, members will have seen in the media, I'm quite sure, the proportionate response to crime pilot has been run up in A division, so up in the Grampian area, and we'll see, we're all keen to find out how that, it's very early stages, it's running for 3 months, and I'm sure whoever comes in to replace me will bring an update back to this group in relation to it. But longer term, as we've spoken about many times, fraud is an increasing demand for us, particularly online fraud, so that'll be something that will be looked at. Looking at our prioritisation of non-recent crimes and how we approach those, and various other direct reporting measures to try and remove some of the bureaucracy that we currently have in terms of reporting into Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service. So in terms of the demand itself and our performance, we've seen an increased call demand across Scotland of 600,000 incidents during the reporting period from the 1st of April. There's an additional 420,000 incidents have been recorded, so it's just to give members a bit of a flavour of what that's looking like across the country. We'll continue to target, as I said, the demand and risk and prioritise those resources to whatever's causing the most harm and protecting the vulnerable. So we have seen an increase in some of the crime categories, and clearly with a reduced capacity and limited investment, that is going to have an impact on our detection rates. It may take longer for us to be able to deal with incidents, and we'll be looking to deal with them differently at times as well. So basically, overall, we have got, our ACCs have got various work streams now that they are up and well running and looking to deliver some outcomes quite shortly. So we've got something called Criminal Justice Improvement Group, which is looking at
The what? Sorry.
Criminal Justice Improvement Group, and that's looking at all the kind of criminal justice processes and working with very closely with our partners. COPFS are involved in that group to try and make them as efficient as possible, to buy back some demand into our frontline resources. There's a review of local policing ongoing at ACC level, and one of the ACCs also has a demand and capacity review group in terms of those, anything that we can do wider. So I suppose, what does this mean for K Division and specifically for members for Inverclyde,
Yes.
which is what you're all waiting on, and at the edge of your seat. So
You're gagging.
as we discussed the last time, reduction of 17 officers, and I can assure members that there is still no decision as to where those officers' posts are coming from across the division at the moment. I spoke at the last extraordinary meeting round about us now working on our target operating model, and so since the last meeting we've got a goal group, and I'm sitting as goal commander up and running. We've met several times now in relation to that. There's really wide representation, not just across the division, but also with our national divisions as well, and the support that we receive from them to see what can we do differently within the confines of our policies and procedures, etc. Very much at the heart of all this is the welfare and the well-being of the workforce, because ultimately the exec have been quite clear, they do not want, and they are not asking any of our officers or staff to do anything additional because of the loss of posts. But people have a professional pride. Police officers, police staff want to do the best job and do the best job for the community. So it's my job and that of the management team to protect the workforce, and the whole group has a very clear focus round about that. So the kind of things that we've been looking at, clearly our community policing model, we've been looking at, we've been into great detail. Damien's had the task of looking at the remit of it, how we could evolve that remit to make sure it's more focused. And there's a further paper going to come back my next local groups tomorrow. This is a bit unfortunate that it's what before today. We've been looking at how we prioritise bail management, how we prioritise some of our intelligence packages, diary calls coming in from our command and control centre, and also looking at pushing very much direct measures, so recorded police warnings under the Lord's Advocate's guidelines and where those are appropriate, to try and increase the use of those. It's not something that historically police officers, certainly in the West, would use that often. We would tend to submit a case into the Procurator Fiscal. However, we're trying to increase the use of that. And just to give you a bit of a flavour, that in terms of the bureaucracy and the admin time that would be used round about submitting a case to the Fiscal versus a recorded police warning, is quite substantial. But more than that, it's things like we wouldn't then be having, probably physical contact and bringing someone into custody. We don't want to be bringing people into custody unless we absolutely have to. It opens officers up and staff up to being assaulted, and we've seen that in our custody centres. So there's a lot of benefits if we can get that right in terms of the volume of time that we spend within the custody suite with arrested persons. We've been doing a lot of work as well through the whole group round about citations. We lose a substantial amount of our workforce every day to court, and a lot of the time, unfortunately, they're not required on the day, but that depletes our night shift resources, and we've now got an officer embedded within the Fiscal's office working between Paisley and Greenock Fiscal's office to try and ensure that only the officers that are actually required are actually attending court. So there's a lot of work ongoing, and we appreciate the support and help that we're getting from Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service colleagues in relation to that. One of the suggestions, and I suppose it's important to highlight that these suggestions are not just by the management team, so I've run some drop-in sessions, really keen to hear from officers and staff themselves about how they think we could be more efficient, and there was a really good suggestion right about the PDAs, the handsets that officers use and how we can use those more effectively. So we're looking at that with IT colleagues at the moment. Looking at in terms of your local policing, there's already been a service delivery review ongoing, so they're present at the whole group to offer any potential solutions. Working really closely with our partners as well. I think Superintendent Gibson has spoken previously about some of the work, and we'll talk about this in terms of the performance report round about our missing people and our repeat missing people and the vulnerability that causes. So there's a lot of work ongoing with partners in relation to that to try and reduce our demand. And round about mental health as well with the hospitals. We're working closely with the hospitals in terms of their protocols, etc. as well. We've also had a good look at, and I'm grateful to officers for committing their time to submit to a survey in terms of our hidden demand. So in terms of local policing and Inverclyde and Renfrewshire resources, we spend a lot of time in custody, we spend a lot of time at hospital watching, guarding over offenders that have been arrested, we spend a lot of time at locus protection. And that abstraction takes us away from being able to respond to threat risk environment at that particular time. So we're also looking at that. So it's a really comprehensive goal group. Everybody's really committed to it, and there's been a lot of really good engagement. Unfortunately, I'm not going to see it through to its conclusion, as you alluded to, convener, at the start. But certainly, whoever my successor will be, I will ensure it's fully briefed in terms of where we've got to, and once that person's identified, get them invited into the goal group as well. As we move forward, I'll continue to run it right up until I finish kind of mid-October. So that I'll take a pause there before we move into performance, but that gives you a flavour of all the work that's ongoing at the moment. And maybe just the final point would be that actually once we start to make some decisions round about this work, and what we're going to move to in terms of that demand piece, then we'll come out to partners and consult at that stage in terms of this is what we think would work for us. And we've deliberately, it was interesting in the very first school group, and I don't think Damien or Gary were at that, but in the very first school group, we concentrated in on the target operating model and the resources and making sure we've got the right people in the right places at the right time. And what became really apparent was until we looked at the capacity and demand piece, we couldn't really develop that target operating model to say where the resources needed to be. So we're focused in on that demand reduction, capacity creation, and then we'll then move back into the target operating model and making sure that we've got sufficient resources in the right places. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I think with the members, colleagues don't mind, I think we'll deal with that just now.
Okay.
And then we'll move on to the statistics. Could I'd just like to add that I met with the Police Federation to hear their views on budget cuts. They were quite strong, but quite measured, and were quite sympathetic to what management had to do to handle a situation that was not of management's making.
Yeah.
So I did that. Could I, if I understand it, no decisions have been made yet on any reduction in police within Inverclyde?
Yes, that's correct. So there's 17 officers and it was vacant posts. So it was posts that were already sitting that hadn't been filled, have been removed from my establishment. But that's across the division at the moment. Where those reductions are going to sit permanently, there has been no decision made around about Inverclyde.
17 across the division.
Yes.
We don't know what it's going to be for
Yes.
Inverclyde until their new successor comes along and gives us that news.
Well, I'll take the goal group as far as I can before I finish. If I'm at the stage of being able to develop that target operating model, then I'll absolutely get that in place. But probably, given the short time scales now, it'll probably be for my successor to sign that off, because it'll be their target operating model moving forward.
Thank you very much, Laura. I open it up now to my colleagues. Councillor Clougherty.
Thanks, David. It's probably coming on for your question. The 17 officers are already accounted for, but you also mentioned possible further reduction throughout Scotland, 600 officers, which again have a knock-on effect to Renfrewshire. Obviously, that's predicated on the budget, but as we all know, we're all going to be suffering for the budget. So, you know, the police are putting in their stuff, fire will put in their stuff, local authorities put in their stuff, you know, so we know that. So taking that aside, it means it possibly mean a further reduction in policing within Inverclyde coming ahead. I don't say it all, but in all likelihood, because we know what budgets are overall, so it's not a question of budgets. When do your officers say, well, okay, it's impossible to maintain the service that you've got? And I think it's a question I probably asked of the fire station last meeting as well. There's got to be a breaking point. We already know we've had operations down here before, Operation Torch. We know James and Paul's area, Larkfield, is under a lot of pressure. I've already spoke about Town Centre numerous times. When does that bend and break? Is there a point that us, as a police scrutiny board, should really start to worry?
I think...
or should we worry now?
Well, I think the fact that I've established a goal group gives you an indication of my concerns round about it. And as I said, I'm really focused in on the well-being and the welfare of the officers, because you know, it's easier to say that we're not going to ask people to do more. The reality is, as I say, people's professional pride means that they naturally try and step into the spaces that we've got and try to fill them. And that's my concern in terms of the workforce. The Scottish Police Federation are represented at my goal group as well, so be assured that they are also there looking after the well-being and welfare of the officers through the goal group structure. But I think, you know, having the establishment reduction that we've had, 17 in one of the bigger divisions, isn't that big a number, but to Renfrewshire and Inverclyde, it's a really big number to us. And as you rightly highlight, if we don't get the budget that we need, bearing in mind our budget, 85% of that is on salaries. So if we don't get the budget that we need moving forward, reductions, I would expect them to come across the board from all business areas in Scotland.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Clover, and thank you for a very straightforward answer. Provost.
Thank you, Convener. Thanks for your presentation. It was focused on the budget, and there was a degree of politics in it. What you did mention was how officers' time was tied up, and one of the things you mentioned was locust protection. Now, there was an incident in Port Glasgow the other day there, and at the end of the street you had there was a policewoman standing beside the car, stopping folk along the road. Now, surely that's not a job for a fully trained police officer to do that. So is there not an opportunity here to introduce a sort of civilian roles to work alongside you on obviously on a lesser paid scale to do that kind of operation?
So that is something that the organisation have looked at. We're not in a position at the moment to be able to progress that, unfortunately, and I would say we're in a catch-22 at the moment in terms of we don't have the budget to be able to employ additional police staff. We're actually having to reduce that as well, but it's certainly something that the organisation and the executive have in the back of their mind that eventually need to evolve so that actually people, officers are taking things where they need policing powers, and we use other mechanisms and other staff to be able to deal with other types of incidents on our behalf, because you're absolutely right, in terms of an officer standing at the end of the road, it's frustrating in terms of locust protection and sometimes how long a locust needs to be protected, but there's also very good reasons for that as well, and it's something at the morning meeting that we review on a daily basis in terms of what locust protection do we have on. And there's one in play this morning, for example, but we've requested mutual aid from other divisions, so there's 5 officers have come in from other divisions, so it's not necessarily contained within Inverclyde or within K Division, and we will look for assistance from elsewhere as required. We will also from across the division as well from Inverclyde, if that's where the resources required, then we'll bring in officers from Paisley, Renfrew, Johnston, wherever we need to come in and assist.
Okay. Councillor Brennan, you've waited patiently.
No, not at all. Thanks very much, and thanks so much for your candour and frankness in that report. I think what I find that we're often told as well is that Inverclyde's got quite a unique justice picture in terms of having the custody suite, the court and the prison. And so I think when you're talking here possibly about reduction in staffing levels and potential increase in underinvestment, then it's really concerning, and I think that's definitely what we are feeling here. So I think, like you've described, there's such a commitment from all the staff, and we see like your police staff working in partnership with our council staff and with wardens and trying to get the best for Inverclyde and for our sense of community safety. But I think what you're talking about today is just really concerning in terms of the potentially detrimental impact on public protection. So I think I just want to thank you for bringing that to our attention. I think if we've not got already that link to the report that you talked about at the start of your presentation, then it would be good to get that shared with everybody on the panel and get a chance to see that. Maybe we've had it already, but if not, to get a closer look at that, and so that we can really furnish ourselves with all these facts as well, because it does look quite worrying. Thanks very much, Councillor Wilson.
The Chief Superintendent nodded and replied to your question.
I did.
I think it was a yes.
It was a yes, Convener, and Hugh and I'll make sure that happens. In terms of that link, we'll get that circulated.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks for your comments.
Councillor Moran.
Thanks, Convener. Can I also thank the Chief Superintendent for her honesty when presenting this report, and when the Chief Constable retired, I think it brought a lot of realism into the situation that Police Scotland's in. And I would like to think it, us as a member of this committee, that we don't accept this. we sent a letter to the Cabinet Secretary for Justice saying that we as a Scrutiny panel of the Council, cannot accept these cuts and asking to seriously look at the funding of Police Scotland, because the only people who will be celebrating this report is the criminals, because they don't have any problem recruiting or getting people. So until we show some political backbone in support of the police, and I would suggest that we write a letter to the Cabinet Secretary saying we are not prepared to accept these cuts and ask them to look again at the police allowance, the money they're going to give the police this year. If it's flat cash or what it is, but if it's flat cash, increase it. If not, make sure that they don't put any more cuts coming down the road to the ordinary citizens of Scotland.
Thank you, Councillor Moran. Is it the wish of the panel that a letter goes to that extent? Are we content?
I think the big problem, I'm content with it, don't get it wrong, but the big problem is Scottish Government's got a budget, the same way as we've got a budget. If we actually give police more money, then I don't want them to cut it to the councils. No, I don't want them to come to us and say, well, okay, these have lobbied really well for the police, but unfortunately, no, we've got a limited budget here, so if you're lobbying for that, lobbying for this, then we've got to take it from somewhere. You know, we want to protect the NHS, we want to protect the fire service, we want to protect the police service. Then where does the money come from? So I've got absolutely no problem, because I think it is justifiable. I come here every time and moan at Laura, so I think it's justifiable. But I think we've got to be aware as well is that the money's got to come from somewhere. So if we are protecting one angle, then the money comes to somewhere else. So Councillor Moran's, I've got absolutely no problem with that.
You're no problem.
Just as a committee, we've got to understand the pressures that we will be under a local government when we make cuts, the same way as we've got to understand what's happening at a national level as well.
And the Scottish Government has had to make political decisions.
Yes.
Made a decision to give the junior doctors 15.5%. That money has got to be found from somewhere, but the junior doctors have not gone on strike, whereas down south, they're not giving the junior doctors a wages increase and they're on strike. So it's political decisions that the governments have got to make.
Chair, through you, I think the focus of this panel really requires to be on reports before us from the police. We can't stray into other matters.
What other matter?
Other political issues.
I think it's a realistic decision that was made by the people who are governing it, and they felt it was the right decision. And I have no problem with them making that decision.
I had no politics in that. We were subject to a letter in the local press saying that we've done nothing to fight the corner for the fire brigade, right? And they mentioned certain councillors who were opposed supportive. The fact that myself and John Crowder and the rest were all standing and soaking with them firefighters is very disappointing. But at the end of the day, we're in here to represent the people of Hinckley. We advocate their voices. And if we can't do it, who can do it? If we are beyond sending a letter to the Cabinet Secretary, which should be no politics, saying, sorry, we just think they went too far, can you have a look at this again? That's all I'm saying. I don't want politics to do that.
Any other comments? Thank you again, Laura. Just in case we finish before I get a chance, I'd just like, on behalf of Inverclyde Council, to thank you for your service to this committee and to Inverclyde. You've done a lot. You've introduced certain initiatives in Inverclyde, which have been very helpful and very useful to us. You've also made yourself very approachable. I know that you've been very approachable with me. I know also there's been other councillors, like Councillor Paisley was in a position to contact you, and you were open to be contacted, which is excellent. Some people just hide themselves away. You haven't done that. And thank you very much for coming along today and speaking to us so honestly. So we wish you, on behalf of the panel, all the very best in wherever you're going, and I'm sure you'll let us know at some stage. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Convener, and thanks members for your support. It's a strange thing to see, but I thoroughly enjoyed coming to Scrutiny and Inverclyde. You've always kept me on my toes, and actually I quite enjoy that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We now move on to the Police Scotland Performance Report. Laura?
Thank you. So the report we're looking at, Convener and members, 1st of April to the 31st of July of this year. Pleased to say that we're down in the total number of crimes. Unfortunately, and as I spoke about earlier, our incidents are up by 11.9%, sitting at 7,183. So just some key highlights, and then I'll hand over to Damien as usual for some further detail. But common assault and our overall violent crime are both down by 2.9 and 2.8% respectively. And I'd like to highlight the good work that was done, and you'll see it later in the report round about Operation Valkyrie and Operation Marsburg, which was the tragic murder and shooting earlier in the year, and then thereafter Marsburg was our response to the increased violence across Inverclyde. So that's a real positive for me in terms of that reduction that we are seeing. Domestic abuse incidents as well, down by 10.6%, which is quite significant, and again really positive. Unfortunately, road traffic collisions are up by 133.3%, and although the percentage is really high, the numbers are smaller than that, but clearly more than we would like. And in terms of our missing people that I alluded to earlier, up by 20% as well, and we'll speak a bit more about that. And overall, in terms of our acquisitive crime, members will see that that's up. However, with a significant reduction in housebreakings, and actually that increase in acquisitive crime centred mostly around about online frauds, etc. A lot of work being done in the serious and organised crime space down in Inverclyde, and we've made some significant arrests over the reporting period in relation to that. And I'll probably just pass over and hand over to Damien now just to give members a wee bit more detail, if that's okay.
Thank you. Any questions?
I understood my job for me pretty much.
Yes.
Most things I covered, just as the Commander said, the obvious trend is despite the budget cuts that we're all acutely aware of, the lack of staff and the reduced budgets. One thing we didn't cover was one thing we relied on, rightly or wrongly, for a long time, overtime. Aside from the budget, the post cuts, we've lost overtime as well. So that is cut down to the bare bone as much as we can to work towards the savings that we're required to meet. So despite that, as the Commander said, crimes are actually down year to date. And as you know, we used to use the 5-year average, which was always skewed for probably the last couple of years because of COVID. We're literally comparing the same period last year, and the crimes are down. The incidents are up, but that's quite consistent across the board. So that's probably giving you an indication of the volume of calls that the police are going to that are not traditional policing matters. And one of the work streams that's going ahead, and I feel very passionate about, is areas of business that doesn't require a cop and uniform to go and deal with. Partners, and we do good support locally. But the national pictures, there's certain work that still needs done for us to get further support in certain areas like mental health. And I'll come on to some of the work that's been done with the NHS through our new partnership team. If you recall, there was a team set up, Superintendent Lorna Gibson. The partnership superintendent has a very limited number of staff that she deploys very well across division. What they've been doing recently is the Commander talks on work with the IRH and work with missing persons. We've had an issue at every scrutiny board I've been at in the last year with substantial numbers of missing people. Consistent is that the top 5 tend to make up about 60% of missing episodes, and in this case, sadly, the majority are under 19. Most are youths, not all, but a significant number are care for children. So we've tried a number of things to safeguard the kids themselves, and that in itself reduces the demand for the police. And one of that, it's an efficient use of time, is one of our new inspectors in the performance arena, the partnership arena, is Laura Hammond. She and her team have been out meeting with the care units, the IRH and other areas where we tend to have spikes in missing people. And a very efficient use of time given presentations, which I have to say the IRH and the care units locally have been very helpful and we've received them really well. We are confident in future panels we'll be able to report reductions in misfares just because we're getting the right care to the right children at the right time. Likewise, with some of the patients leaving hospitals, a lot of the time that will refer to people with mental health concerns, vulnerable adults, people with addictions. We're working closely through the hub with a variety of partners that will come to these meetings to try and get care for these people. So aside from doing the right thing, getting support for these vulnerable adults and kids, it's actually going to help work towards what we all need, and that's the narrow demand, so we can focus more on the key threat risk and harm. Commander touched on the road traffic casualties. That's probably the most striking stat on the front page. The numbers themselves are actually relatively low. It doesn't take away from injuries sustained, but due to the relatively low numbers compared with other areas in the West Command area, the percentage increase does seem quite high, regardless, even prior to this report coming out. My Deputy Paul Thompson, the Community Inspector, had put in place a very substantial policing plan, and that involved local cops, community officers, response officers, and police from Rose Policing. There's been, through the last 6 weeks, and you've probably done this yourself, Councillor, through daily business, there's been a substantial push towards reducing casualties on the road. What we've done is, and again, just to offset, sometimes these activities get some complaints, police are out doing speeders, they've nothing better to do. We hear that quite a lot, but the truth is, we've had an increase in serious injuries from 2 to 8 over the reporting period compared to last year. Luckily, no fatalities, and luckily we have no serious child injuries. We have had at least one child knocked down. Off the back of that, David touched on earlier on, worked closely with fire service who were doing off the road back the road safety campaign, and their inputs have been really beneficial. We get a lot of feedback from cops who have kids in local schools. The feedback we're getting is that some of the information that they're getting through open source that education colleagues are putting out and but is available online is actually very helpful for parents to educate kids. We're trying to limit the number of times we send cops in individual schools like we used to do, because it's not working. I can't afford to have an individual cop in every individual school to give these inputs. What we're trying to do now is we're trying to use the partnership team along with partners to work in a smarter way. We've got WebEx here for this meeting. We're trying to look ahead and how we can best deploy efficient use of inputs to school kids and other vulnerable groups. So that's a work in progress, but the initiative, just to give you a bit of reassurance, what is basically known in policing terms as the Fatal 5, the things that we need to target to try and drive down casualties on the road. Seatbelts, mobile phone, drinking, drug driving, careless driving and speeding. So we're not doing this for any other reason other than trying to make the roads a bit safer in Inverclyde, and already, as you'll see in the report, not due to this recent operation, just due to daily business, there's been a substantial uptick of nearly a fifth in the number of road policing charges that have been liable tickets. That's not including the times where we will detect a minor speeding offence and we'll use discretion. All we're trying to do is influence road behaviour. We're not looking to penalise folk for driving vehicles on the road. I'll move on quickly down to the drug release death. Now, I think this is something I feel passionate about, something I bring up every time. The statistical report will tell you that there are 6 drug-related deaths, and that's the same as last year. So in other words, it's not getting worse. However, I'll caveat that with the fact that we don't have a full picture. Some of these deaths may well indeed be drug-related. We're still waiting for toxicology for a certain number of these deaths. The reason I mention it is it's just to back up. There was mixed views, I think, through the police, the public, and others why the police were carrying naloxone. And I have to admit, when it first came out as a force pilot, I did question whether that was suitable for the police myself, and that's me just being honest. With hindsight, I think it's been a good move. We've got folks deployed to get concerned with person calls, violence calls, drug units going through doors with drug warrants. And we've now got the figures in this report of 108 operational officers since February 2023 locally deployed. So we're actually a bit more than that now. We've almost got every deployable cop, sergeant, and response inspector given naloxone and given the training, and they'll be carrying that at all times on duty. That includes uniform and plainclothes units. Finally, just quickly touch on the drug supply. Drug supply detections, my hope is we're going to increase that, frankly. It's a lot of good work into getting the detections listed, but I'm quite keen to increase that further for future reports. There's been an exceptional process of crime act seizure. In other words, police remove monies from criminals under certain powers, but it's quite clear the monies, or it's suspected the monies come from criminal acts. As you see from the report, approximately £800,000. That's divisional, so that's Redemption and Inverclyde, but 3/4 of that, roughly, is from working in Inverclyde. Commander mentioned the operations we ran earlier in the year, and it's a lot of that money is down to proactive actions around Operation Valkyrie and Operation Marsburg. Final thing I'll touch on quickly, and I know David and his team have covered that. The awful fires, again, the report details 28 in total, almost a 10% drop. The truth is, and just to be transparent, my view is that there'll actually be quite an uptick over probably the last 6 months, and I think we reported this at the last panel. It was a pretty substantial problem. It was mainly due out to files for the issue of Clune Park. There was a substantial uptick in children, as David's team have said, setting fire service, put them out and move on. We looked at a number of different angles prosecuting. We tried when we get opportunities. Realistically, as David covered very well, I had to get into education, working with the fire service and the council. We put a plan in place back in June, which I think was just after the 25th of May was the last scrutiny board where we picked up and the issue was really becoming something we had to get our teeth into. That plan's very quickly whittled down the numbers substantially. We've looked out the box. Some of the fire starters involved are juveniles who take a sympathetic approach. We actually had to stop it through education, and on one occasion a youth had to be replaced in a care facility out with the Inverclyde area, and he's actually performing pretty well at this point. So there's a very substantial plan in place, and I'd just like to thank the council and fire service fully. The truth is we couldn't have brought down the fires off our own back, regardless of how many cops you threw at it. So credit's due. I think I'll end there unless there's any questions on what I mentioned.
Thank you. We'll go on to questions. Just before we move on, Councillor Moran, I had a word with Mr McEwen, and he informs me, as far as your proposal is concerned, that there wasn't universal support for it, and I shan't be sending a letter.
We never, nobody asked. Nobody asked this.
Nobody objected.
It's either, sorry, Keegan, would it either not be universally agreed or asked again, or we could put it as a motion?
Through you, Chair, yes, there could be a motion. Sorry, I had understood that it was unanimously agreed because it was no dissent, but I didn't specifically ask members, so I can't.
But I rely upon the House. I rely upon the House of Mr McEwen to tell me when he felt there wasn't universal. Would you repeat what you told me?
Yeah, can I apologise? You asked the letter was full, but things said that the was agreement for that. So yeah, that's fine. So happy to refer to questions that are new.
What do you want to do, James?
Oh, well, it's not to me.
You're happy for me to send a letter?
I think it's probably for everybody to have an agreement on it, isn't it?
Yes.
I think perhaps if we take
Yes, thank you for coming.
if we take it to a motion, Chair, I wondered if it would help. I'm just looking at the remix of the panel, and panel members will be aware of the restrictions on their responsibilities and their duties. They are able to make recommendations, to consider improvements. They're able to recommend, prioritise and objectives for the policing of the area. They can recommend priorities and objectives. They can agree the police and fire and rescue local plans, scrutinise and review the outcomes, priority and objectives set out in the plans, provide comments in response to consultations, promote engagement with all interested parties, and promote engagement with all interested parties, and make representations to national authorities as required in relation to wider scrutiny issues. So I think if there's any later, it would need to be on the basis just that the panel had raised concerns, not that the panel would have any authority to ask the Scottish Government to take any action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure we can draft something up, Mr McEwen. Can I leave that in your safe hands? That's the last time I'm coming to you for advice.
Chair, on that basis, do you wish me to ask? We've got a motion from Councillor Moran. I think that a letter of that nature is sent by the Chair. Does any member have an amendment to that motion?
No.
No. So there's no amendment to the motion.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Moran. Thank you for that. Now do we have questions for Chief Inspector Kane or Chief Superintendent Waddle on the police report? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, actually, probably a question for both the Chief Inspector and the Chief Superintendent. I'll start with the Chief Inspector first. I welcome the multi-agency group that you set up to deal with issues that Evercourt Mounds Bay Beach after I raised concerns with you in my previous board. I know locals have kind of appreciated to see a stronger focus on issues that social behaviour they've been dealing with. I hope you agree to convening with that group again, ahead of the next kind of Easter and summer season, you would help kind of continue to provide reassurance to the communities that this is a focus area and that work has been done to address the issues there.
Thanks, Councillor. Basically, what we do is try and plan ahead for seasonal issues, and it's going to be Easter, summer, Halloween, bonfire night. We put plans in place ahead of them. What I'll do is I'll give you the assurance we're going to look at resource. My gold standard is going to be we put something similar in place to last year. Scope transparency, depending on what's on the ground at the time, that might need to evolve and change, but you've got my assurance that if I'm still in this seat, still doing this job, never takes my role on maybe, we will definitely look at that. There's a number of things that will happen over the course of the summer periods. That is one that I suspect, if I'm being honest, is likely to resurrect itself. So the plan this year will be, the following year, will be start the activities that we put in place this year a bit earlier, if we have sufficient resources to do so, and we're not distracted to any other pressing groups.
Sure, thanks for that. Chief Superintendent, one of the last times you were here at the Scrutiny panel and I was substitute, well, I raised the issue with you about data and about being able to break it down. You'll be awards much like the fire service does. I think you said at the time that there was a new data system being rolled out in the West. I'm just wondering, is that data system in place yet? Because also we don't have that level of breakdown, and it's also an issue that's been raised to me about with the Community Council across Inverclyde about their ability to get data for their ward so they can provide their role in scrutinising service delivery.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. It's not in place yet, but it's certainly still on the radar for us, and Damien will see writing furiously there. We'll take a note of that and make sure that actually once that's in place, then we can revisit it. It's probably one though that Police Scotland will make a decision on across the board, as opposed to specifically for Inverclyde, whether or not they want to break down further into ward data, which they haven't done up until this point, unlike our fire service colleagues. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor?
Yep.
Councillor Daisley.
Thanks, Convener. Just a question around acquisitive crime, which is on page 18 of that report. The third paragraph down around shoplifting. So it's a kind of mixed message, but although it says the figures remain higher than the national average, it does say that shoplifting has fallen on the previous year. So I was just wondering if the exclusion zones that have been in place have been effective or not. What's your view on that? Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. So shoplifting, the acquisitive crime, you're right, the figures are up. The shoplifting is still unaccepted by I, frankly. There's an article I think somebody might have read in the media just recently where there was folk who's brought in I won't name it, but an individual retail premises in Greenock. It has been one of the higher targeting shoplifting, and as far as I'm concerned, that's probably completely accurate. So what we've got in place is, as you laid out, we have town centre cops, we have community cops for wards. What I've always tried to do is have bespoke cops just for the areas where we have the higher levels of shoplifting. The two that spring to mind, unfortunately, are Greenock Town Centre and Port Glasgow Retail Park. Those scopes are now, because of the nature of the cuts and the postings that we don't have the coverage. I'm now actually having to, unfortunately, this is for full transparency, I've had to remove some of the cops some of the time from Greenock Town Centre. So the truth is that's probably impacted in the fact that the shoplifters are increasing, and that's on me. It's not on the cops themselves. That's my decision. I've had no choice to cover all the wards with the resources I have. I had to withdraw them. So unfortunately, I predicted that was something that was going to take place. Back to your point with the exclusion zones. So the exclusion zones have been used throughout the course of the year. There was about, the last time I checked the figures, the cops successfully sought 7, I believe, and they were getting used. The way they're basically used as if there's a repeat shoplifter, not an individual who's maybe committing a first offence or more organised criminality, not somebody stealing to feed their kids due to cost of living. Proper targeted, organised, and repeat criminality. We will seek these, and I believe I'm pleased that Paul Cameron mentioned these at board, so I won't go into overall detail, but ultimately means we can place these. Several of the people we got in the initial stages were to breach them day in, day out, and they were getting to jail and they were getting locked up. And as the commander said, they're pushing for measures, in other words, tickets and warnings and reported police warnings. It doesn't apply to these people because they've been given the chance, they've been given the order, and they've breached it. So, frankly, very quickly we've got around that. That's something that the police are not going to tolerate, so that they are working. I'm very much in favour of them. And one other thing that is taking place, I forget exactly which month we achieved this, we have certain funding streams that we did in the previous financial year, pre-April,
and we'd applied for funding from Police Scotland to support local businesses in buying radios for the radio line. So I think it's well documented. I'm not saying anything you can't read in the newspaper. There's been some challenges around phoning the police for non-emergency calls and the time delays. So one way to circumvent that was to give each of the premises that were willing to take it on and use it in radio. So now what I think, I'm a deputy, I'll berate me if I get this wrong, but some memories of 30 radios, I think. That links in with the community corps, and there's facility for us to then get real-time updates, and whether it's crimes unfolding that we can react to in real time, or whether it's crimes that are likely to happen that we can put a presence in and prevent from happening in the first place. Plus it means there's communications and a bit of security between the different stores. So between the exclusion zones, between the community corps I still have in the area when I can, and the radios, we're doing the best we can. And the shopliftings, it was increasing through the early part of the year before this document, so pre-April it was actually rising month on month. But it's remained fairly static, but the truth is it's still unacceptably high, so we're going to have to work harder to do more with it. Hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much, yeah. Thank you.
Francesca?
Thanks very much, Councillor Wilson. It's a comment really, I think, for Area Commander Damien Kane. Just thanks for highlighting what you were saying about the drug-related deaths, that you said obviously that it's an area you're really passionate about. I think it'd be hard to find somebody in Inverclyde who's not, and who wants to see not just these numbers going in the direction that they need to, but we really need to be coming to a range of committees and a range of panels, not just this one, and seeing that there are 0 drug-related deaths occurring in Inverclyde. And until we get to that day, there's obviously work for us all to do. And I suppose this is recovery month that we're in now. We've got the big recovery walk coming on Saturday. We've obviously had, statistics released about the annual figures from 2022 a couple of weeks ago. And we're seeing here that the numbers for the same reporting period last year, exactly the same. It's staying the same, which is tragic, really. I think you mentioned, you're talking about the naloxone introduction, and we're seeing that it's been rolled out. And it's too early really to see, since it was just since February. But I think what we need to start looking for, I suppose, is that we're seeing this figure in here about the training being rolled out, and we just need to eventually see some impact statement there that it's actually making a reduction. So I don't think it's really fair of me to ask you about that just now. It probably is too early and really, really hard to record. But I think when we talk about the training, when we talk about the rollout, and we talk about the access to naloxone, we've got to see an impact. We've got to see that it's having an impact and that fewer people are losing their lives to drugs as well. So I just wanted to add that in. Thanks very much.
Thanks for your comment, Francesca. I don't think it demands an answer, does it?
Just one comment, Councillor, it's okay. Councillor, just on that, a simple case study is, there was a male just recently, sometime in the reporting period, some point early in the summer, on the day shift and the early shift in a public place, quite unusual place to find somebody having a reaction to drugs. I am 100% certain this male had died, and not being for the fact that the public phoned in, realising something untoward, and this adult male was eventually admitted through him and his partner he'd taken some form of drug that had caused this reaction. The cops on the scene, each of them was using naloxone. They used, I think, 4, maybe 5. That's how far gone the guy was. We went to the ambulance, as we always do. That could all have been put in, but in the travel time for the ambulance to get there, what they delivered actually probably saved his life, and then the medics took it from there. So I think that's one case study. I take your point entirely though. I think it's probably better for me if I can try and get some better statistics and case studies for when we've used it. It's maybe not something we formally record, but I'll certainly try and highlight any I can. That's one that springs to mind because it was quite recent and very unusual.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Tell me, will those cops get recognised for taking that action?
Yes, it's something to do with me and the commander. They've been spoken to by their supervisors. It's been recorded through their self-discovery. The purpose of that is going to be that sometimes we'll have awards that are nationally recognised and criteria is met, whereas that falls at a level where they would give individual recognition.
Because it's not easy to give somebody 4 goes of that, is it?
So what we use, I think there's somebody's a misconception that the ones we have are syringes that we use nasal sprays. So they're carried over their cops belts, so it's quite clear that they are naloxone carriers. And the crews that were there, we had rolled out the training once they advanced this eventuality. So I think that's one good success story.
Thank you, Damien. Yes, John.
Thank you, convener. Just looking at the road traffic casualties, although the figure looks massive, where it's up 133.3%, the actual figures, as you'd correctly said, is low at 21. But is there any sort of accident hotspots? We always say that there is no such thing as a bad road, it's bad driving. But there are areas, obviously, where there's accident hotspots. And could it be that the road markings could be improved? Could the design of the road be improved? That would maybe reduce the number of casualties on the roads. I'm thinking of the likes of the west end of Greenock, where we have the parking on the left-hand side. You come to the junction, then it's parking on the right-hand side. You've got a small Z. There seems to be quite a lot of accidents on those junctions, whether they could be improved. I know that it wouldn't be your responsibility to do so. It would fall down to Inverclyde Council and the roads department. But is there any evidence to say that that is a contributing factor?
Thanks, Councillor. So that's something I look at quite a lot. And to give you a bit of reassurance, there's no repeat areas. To see the injuries we're recording, I won't give you the exact details, obviously, but 41-year-old male, Kilmacombe, 79-year-old female, Port Glasgow.
Sorry, Chair, through you, I don't think it's appropriate to mention specific or personal information that could possibly lead to the identification.
No, apologies. I wasn't given the information that was going to be identifiable. Anyway, I'll stick to the locations. So Kilmacombe, Port Glasgow, Greenock, Gourock, Queensbay, basically got all areas. There's no, what we do is we have road traffic management officers. They form part of basically traffic cops, roads policing unit officers. They link in with the local authority. If there's a concern, there's a new build estate being put in place, or there are concerns highlighted through the council that there's an accident hotspot, as it used to be called. Traffic management, from a police perspective, look at it and offer recommendations to the council. Council are then entitled to go and make changes to reduce the speed limit and put yellow lines down. That's daily business between the council and police Scotland. So that process is already embedded. And it's an evolving piece. If an area is highlighted through our statistical reports, through this function, the reports that we do, or through the back office checks I make with my road policing inspector who works out of Govan. Between us, there's a number of quality checks for where there might be a so-called accident black spot, and if there is, it's something that we would engage the council with and give advice on, and it can be changed and fixed. There's none springing to mind from this reporting period nor the previous ones that have been at, and from my review, and apologies if I overstepped the mark of the details I was given. My point was just to raise it. It's not kids getting knocked down outside the same school. It's not any age group. It's not any specific area. It's different ages, different genders, adults, children, people in vehicles, pedestrians, and it's all over Inverclyde. That in itself makes it quite difficult for us to target, but what we're doing is we're taking a broad brush approach. We're looking at areas where we know there has been accidents. We're giving visibility, putting the education piece in along with the fire service, and we're doing the visible enforcement, which you'll probably then see in a variety of social media outlets in order to try and reduce driver behaviour, reduce speeds and influence driver behaviour across Inverclyde as a whole. Hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay with that, John?
Yes, quite happy with that, yes.
I don't see any other likes or nothing on the screen. Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you. We move on now to new business. Agenda item number 4, firework control zones. Mr. McNabb.
Thank you, convener. I'll endeavour to be brief on this one. Members will obviously be aware there's been quite a lot of speculation in the press about firework control zones and when they might be brought in. Just to clarify for members, the provisions that allow for firework control zones were brought into force on the 22nd of June and require a minimum period of 28 to 32 weeks for full consultation. So even if we've been in a position to go out to consultation on a firework control zone, we wouldn't have been able to do that in time for the November the 5th this year. Scottish Government is recommending that we use the findings of this year's Operation Moonbeam, which is the multi-agency operation which deals with fireworks and bonfires, to inform any future applications for firework control zones. Section 3 of the report gives some details on the type of circumstances where a firework control zone might be appropriate. These can include various things, including animal welfare. It can include antisocial behaviour. It can include environmental issues. One thing that has been made clear to us, though, is that firework control zones have to be evidence-based and have to be proportionate. So we cannot simply suggest that for animal welfare reasons, we don't want fireworks in the whole of Greenock. It has to be based on a proportionate response where there is a particular evidence of a particular problem. So I suppose, to give an example, if there was an animal rescue centre where there was regular fireworks nearby, then that might be a justified case. Section 4 of the report, I suppose, gives details on our future actions. Scottish Government is offering funding to develop proposals for firework control zones. We have given a soft expression of interest, and we will be looking for authority to take that forward from the Environment and Regeneration Committee. We've also carried out initial discussions on potential firework control zones with partners, including Police Scotland, and we'll take those forward through Operation Moonbeam and beyond, and we'll be using the Community Safety Partnership for those discussions. We will bring a proposed process for approval and revocation of zones to the November Environment and Regeneration Committee. That will reflect the need for member involvement. So the suggestion is that either we will look for the committee to approve any future firework control zones, or potentially the full council. That's still to be decided, but that will be up to the committee. We certainly want members to be involved in any future zones. Finally, we have to develop a process for community requests for firework control zones, and again, we'll bring that process to the next Environment Regeneration Committee. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Martin. I know Councillor Daisley and I were at the Blackfield Housing Association AGM last night, and I was approached by several people about fireworks and bonfires, but that will come out through the consultation. Councillor Crowther.
Thank you, Convener. It's not a question, it's rather a comment rather than a question. I very much welcome this paper. The content on it explains everything in very, very plain English, and it seems to take a very common sense approach. I do welcome the further paper when it comes to the Environment and Regeneration Committee, but what I would like to say is to thank officers for this paper, and it's well written out, and I fully understand everything that's been printed. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Daisley.
Thanks, Convener. Just in the mention of Operation Moonbeam, I wondered if it had any relevance to the legislation or policing of pop-up fireworks shops or retail outlets.
Martin?
I can answer that one. No, it doesn't. Operation Moonbeam is to do with bonfires and the use of fireworks in the community. We have extensive powers to deal with pop-up fireworks shops and, in fact, anywhere licensed to sell fireworks. And there's quite detailed legislation that covers those. And they will be, if there are any proposed, they will be inspected, and they'll have to meet the standards required in that legislation.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Moran.
Hi, thanks, Convener. Very much welcome this report, but it will be next year before it comes into action. No, my question would be is, with the resources of the police, the firefighters stretched to breaking point, where we would have these control zones, if everybody to have a fireworks outside the control zone, who would be policing that? Would the council, community wardens, or the police and fire rescue be brought back into fighting to dismantle these makeshift bonfires and these displays that have, we all know where they are. You know, so my big concern would be, you know, I welcome the legislation, but going forward, my concern would be how we get police it.
Good point, Martin.
So I suppose there's a couple of aspects there. I mean, obviously, the council has some powers in terms of sale of fireworks. The police have powers currently in terms of misuse of fireworks. And the Act brings in, if we bring in a firework control zone, it would bring in greater powers. And there obviously, this is why we need to have multi-agency discussions before proposing a firework control zone, because there's no point doing so if it cannot feasibly be policed. In terms of the bonfires that we know about on an annual basis, Operation Moonbeam will look at those sites and we'll look at how we can control them. But ultimately, I suppose it's, as we've seen in the past, there has to be a decision on the safety of actually carrying out any works to remove a bonfire and whether those are justified. And ultimately, that comes down to a policing decision. We did last year remove quite a number of bonfires, but ultimately, I think probably the Larkfield one went ahead, and that's down to a kind of risk assessment at the time. But it's possible my colleagues in Police Scotland might want to comment on that.
Well, the Larkfield one was removed one evening, and it was back up the next morning.
And then
Laura, do you want to contribute?
Yep, thanks, Martin. So obviously we do have a national response to Operation Moonbeam across the country, and that's very closely linked with our fire service colleagues. And really, it's hard to predict what this year's going to bring, but we'll look at it on a case-by-case basis, as we always do. They do need to be risk assessed, as you highlighted. We did dismantle last year and it was rebuilt within the day. So you know, we will look at it on a case-by-case basis and use the powers where we can, where it's appropriate.
Thank you, Laura. I don't see any more.
Can I just say, you know,
yeah,
I think a lot to do with the location of these fireworks places. I mean, we all got up at the Stone family, and there's a big bit of waste ground, it's in the middle of nowhere. And they've had it for years, ever since Haverford, it's all took place without incident. There's a bigger ones that take place in other parts of Haverford, which present problems. So I hope we'll get a wee bit of sympathetic when we look at the sides, you know. It doesn't always need to be back to back, which is not available for a lot of my constituencies for Glasgow to get down to back to back or vice versa. So I think we should be looking at, you know, maybe 2 or 3 sites and having just one big one. It could be 2 or 3 small ones for all the communities.
Well, I'm quite sure the police and the fire service are sympathetic to people enjoying themselves. It's just, as you say, if it gets out of hand. That's right. Any more questions or comments? No, I don't see it. Oh, Martin, you've got your hand up.
I was just going to come in on that, and it's possible Anne will keep me straight on this, but effectively, if it's an unauthorised public bonfire, then technically it should have a public entertainment licence, and if it doesn't, then it's technically illegal. So there will be obviously decisions on how that's controlled, but it's not necessarily that easy to turn an absolute blind eye.
Listen, I've organised the bonfire in Kilmacombe for the last 15 years, and I know all about the licence and how increasingly, year after year, it's become more and more difficult to get the licence. But thank you, Martin, for your contribution. We move on to our final agenda item. You, Scott, please, on the local police fire and scrutiny panel update report. You.
Thanks very much, Convener. Just as a quick report to any things that's coming in for the national boards for Police Scotland and also Scottish Fire Rescue. In the report, it gives you an update. Some of this has already been mentioned across committee today. Is obviously Police Scotland's firing of the Chief Constable. 4.1 is about the new partnership agreement with Cosler and Police Scotland and the Scottish local authorities. Looking at that and explain, and then a couple of things on the campaigns that's going on to the Hague campaign. 6.1 is the Her Majesty's Inspectors. There's a link there to a publication about the work around that. 7.1, convener, we were asked to write a letter on behalf of the committee, which was done in the Senate on your behalf, and within this paper.
Did I agree to that?
Yes, you did. And you signed it. Obviously, the letter was sent on your behalf, and we received a response back, which is copied in your papers. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Any questions for Hugh? Sorry? Oh, Councillor Quinn. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Just a quick question. Thanks for the report. I'm just noticing that we don't have an update on the SPA board from the 25th of May. I mean, obviously that was a significant board where Chief Constable Ian Livison had stated that Police Scotland is institutionally racist and discriminatory. So it's just normally we have an update on each board within these papers, so it doesn't seem to be there. So I mean, I think you know, it's quite an important board that we don't miss it and we don't document exactly what was discussed there. I know the next one is next Thursday, so hopefully we'll get some response in terms of what Police Scotland's response to that is. Thanks.
Okay. For yourself, convener, at the time of the paper was produced, we had not received any data from the relevant board, and we are chasing that up to make sure that we have the note of that meeting so we can put it into the next committee. By the time that this report was written, we had no relevant information available to us.
Good question,
Okay, so
Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, so the next one, could we cover then both May and September then? Assume we can have the two of them together.
Yes, I'll put that. That's the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but just before we finish, if I may have probably done this earlier on, can I just place on record our thanks to the Chief Superintendent, and we wish you well in the next chapter. I think sometimes you expect the relationship between police and fire to be very cordial and friendly. Sometimes it doesn't transpire, but within Inverclyde and across K Division, we've really enjoyed not just the direction of the Chief Super, but actually all the teams that work with and how approachable they are with Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. So it would be remiss of me not to place on record to the Chief Super. I wish you well.
Thank you for that, David. I think it's been quite obvious to us the cooperation that's been going on between both forces. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. The meeting is closed. Thank you.
Thank you, convener.
All the best.
Thank you.